Mr. President, Mr. Prime Minister, my dear friend Oliver Ragnar Grimson, Chairman of the Arctic Circle, Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, on my way here this morning, I was thinking how strange the world is that somebody who was born and grew up in equatorial Africa, in the sunny highlands, thinking of these tough, tall, white-haired people who lived in the north, but not knowing who they were, that I'm here today for the first time at the Arctic Council, which is a remarkable milestone in my life, to discuss something which has united all of us in the world, which is our common struggle to deal with the consequences of climate change that we see. And I think this is one of the most unifying, compelling forces that we have today in terms of how we as a global community can seek solutions to move to a future that is positive for all of us and for us, our succeeding generations. And being here, it's also evidence that the Arctic region really is at the front lines of climate change and its fragile ecosystems being disrupted by global warming, which threatens the lifestyles of all and especially of the vulnerable indigenous communities. It's thus not surprising that countries in this region have also played a key role in global efforts to address climate change. The Arctic Circle Assembly has been a strong and important voice in this context, and I feel privileged to be here with you. I'd like to express my deep personal appreciation to my good friend, former President Oliver Grimson, for this invitation. And I just met Oliver a few weeks ago in Florence, in Italy, on the occasion of the high-level meeting of the Global Geothermal Alliance, which was mentioned by Madame Ségolène Royal, and both Oliver and Madame Royal were instrumental in creating this platform for the future of geothermal. And in Florence, we witnessed over 100 countries coming together with the top scientific institutions of the world to look at how we take geothermal forward. And I remember that dinner we had in Abu Dhabi, in an oil-producing country, where we discussed the future of geothermal and what we see today as a vibrant sector in the global energy agenda. At that occasion in Florence, Oliver shared with us the extraordinary story of how Iceland used geothermal energy over the past decade to bring power, heat, and economic prosperity in a spirit of environmental sustainability. And for us at IRENA, Iceland is not only one of our important member countries, but also an example of the visionary leadership that brings change in positive ways to deal with climate change in the future. Climate change unites us all. And just before coming here, as a global organization, we are connected to discussions happening everywhere. I was in the Maldives two days ago. You can imagine it was slightly different temperature in the Maldives. And ministers from small island developing states were discussing how their countries can further strengthen the global momentum to address climate change. And like the Arctic region, small islands around the world today are facing the most direct, brutal effects of global warming. Today's meeting is taking place on the other side of the world, but I sense the same spirit of urgency, unity, and determination in this room. So leaders from vastly different areas of the world are uniting to transform threat and challenge into opportunity and hope. Climate change has the potential to transform our world for the worst, but it has also galvanized an unprecedented level of cooperation and commitment all over the globe. Patricia Espinosa, the Executive Secretary of the Climate Change Convention, has just reminded us of the historic role of the Paris Agreement and how the nations of the world rallied around to take decisive actions against climate change. And I think it's particularly fitting that Madame Royal, as the chairman of the COP, is here with us. In my view, the real success of the agreement that we moved away from a top-down normative approach that everybody would have to sign up to regardless of your situation, to one in which everybody has become part of the solution. We have a practical agenda that in which different countries can implement in different ways to achieve a common objective. Today, 165 countries from around the world have submitted plans to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and these plans, known as the Nationally Determined Contributions, NDCs, out of these, 144 refer specifically to the need to accelerate renewable energy deployment as a principal route to decarbonization. This shows a wide recognition that renewables are essential in implementing the Paris Agreement, given that the energy sector accounts for 2/3 of global emissions. Earlier this year, we released a new study under the auspices of the G20 and in collaboration with the IEA, which outlines how a decarbonization of the energy sector by 2050, in line with the below 2 degrees centigrade objective of the Paris Agreement, is both technically feasible and economically attractive. An energy transition based on renewable energy and energy efficiency can meet 90% of emissions reductions needed to remain in this target. This energy transition will fuel economic growth and create new employment opportunities. Global GDP can be boosted by around 0.8% in 2050, the equivalent of almost $19 trillion in increased economic activity between today and 2050. Renewable energy jobs, which are growing fast today, would reach 26 million by 2050 from 9.8 million today. So now we have a long-term vision of the immense socioeconomic benefits that renewables can bring. This may sound ambitious when I talk about these large numbers, but we see it happening today around the world. We are transforming the fight against climate change from a narrative of constraints and threats to one of opportunity and growth, and Iceland is an exemplary demonstration of this. Countries that have submitted the nationally determined contributions will take stock of their initial progress and begin working on an updated version of their plans to be submitted by 2020. This revision process will present countries with the opportunity to increase the ambition of their renewable energy pledges, which do not, as a matter of fact, fully capture the potential in light of technology improvements and cost reductions that we are seeing. For example, what's happening in the world? Around 160 gigawatts of new renewable power capacity came online in both 2015 and 2016, twice as much as the amount foreseen in the NDCs, doubling in reality the ambitions of the NDCs. We estimate that almost $1.7 trillion will be required globally for the implementation of power sector renewable energy targets in the NDCs. With limited public resources, it is clear that we must focus on leveraging additional private capital to unlock investments in renewables at larger and larger scales. At the same time, the pace of renewables deployment we are witnessing today is impressive. Everywhere, countries are raising their ambitions. Earlier this year, China announced its intention to invest $361 billion in renewable power generation by 2020, and that it was canceling plans to build more than 100 coal plants, some of which were already in the construction phase. Earlier this month, at the first ASEAN IRENA dialogue in Manila, ministers from the Southeast Asian countries reiterated the region's commitment to an ambitious target of 23% of total energy supply coming from renewables by 2025. Last January, in the United Arab Emirates, where IRENA is headquartered, an oil-producing country, the UAE announced that it would cut carbon emissions by 70% and have 44% of power generation from renewables by 2050. And I'm happy that Minister Thani Al-Zayudi will be speaking about the UAE's pioneering role in this field, which brought it to host the global organization mandated to promote renewable energy. and he personally had an important role in making this happen. Earlier this year, I had the opportunity to visit Saudi Arabia, which many of you associated with oil. And I took part in the launch of its first national renewable energy program that aims to deploy 9.5 gigawatts of renewables by 2023 and attract up to $50 billion in investment. News from a few days ago tells us that the first solar power project in that country has attracted a record low bid of 1.79 US dollar cents per kilowatt hour, which would shatter all previous records if awarded. Another oil and gas exporter, like Russia on the other hand, is moving ahead with the country's largest ever renewable energy auction of almost 2 gigawatts of wind power and investing heavily in research and development in the science and technology sector in new technologies. And a few days ago, I also had the honor to be at the Russian Energy Week in Moscow, where for the first time there was a high-level panel of President Putin, the Secretary General of OPEC, the Secretary General of the gas-producing countries, and me. And that was an extremely interesting discussion because it became evident that while we all on the stage may have disagreed on where this is all going, we knew things are changing in ways that nobody had expected. The increasing participation of the largest oil and gas-producing countries is a testament that the transition to a sustainable energy future is truly now global in nature, and these are remarkable developments. While, however, the pace of the energy transition is growing stronger every year, it needs to be accelerated to meet the objectives of the Paris Agreement. A seven-fold growth acceleration in renewables deployment compared to recent years is needed. Energy intensity improvement rates need to increase by 1.5 times. This cannot be achieved through a piecemeal approach. A system-wide transformation is needed that calls for a broad range of solutions and actions. For instance, boosting innovation is critical to accelerating the energy transition, as investment in R&D for renewables is not currently growing and remains minuscule for end-use sectors where the real change will have to come. In this respect, though, Iceland has recently begun showing the way. Its share of new electric and hybrid cars is now the second highest in Europe, with 1 in 6 new cars sold in 2016 being electric, while more than half of the country's population is served by geothermal district heating. I'm happy to note the high level of focus awarded to innovation and innovators in the program of the Arctic Circle Assembly, which I think is essential to the future. Ladies and gentlemen, our efforts to accelerate the uptake of renewable energy will only reach their full potential if we involve all the crucial stakeholders in addition to countries, and the Paris Agreement has recognized this role. Cities, which already account for nearly 2/3 of global energy use, are leading the charge towards decarbonizing energy consumption. Around 40 cities in the United States have committed to moving to 100% renewable energy sources. The private sector is also becoming an active player. Major global businesses are increasingly procuring renewable energy to power their operations in a sustainable manner, with corporate sourcing accounting for $25 billion of new utility-scale renewable energy since 2010. Microsoft, for example, has directly purchased more than 500 megawatts of wind and solar energy in the US. And at the same time, conventional energy companies who have made their money from oil and gas, companies like Statoil and Engie and Total, are ramping up their investments to diversify and grow their renewables portfolios. Ladies and gentlemen, we live in a time of great opportunity and exciting change. An opportunity that unites us all in a positive vision of the future, and the energy transition is at the heart of that vision. The Arctic Circle can be a strong catalyst to encourage actors to accelerate the momentum behind the global energy transition and take decisive action in the fight against climate change. I'm here to tell you that we are ready to stand with you in this journey ahead. Thank you very much.